Lesson 9 involves learning CSS3. I've kind of covered some of the more popular CSS3 text commands earlier in the semester, but now you guys are going to learn about animation, transitions, kind of the whole thing. And so CSS3 is actually really fun. I think you guys are going to like it. There are some pages in your book you need to read, and then you definitely need to go through the lecture demo because there is a whole lot of information in here that is not in your book. So when CSS3 first came out, most of the browsers did not recognize it. And so if you view code, you are still probably going to see these prefixes on commands. And these prefixes were required in order for the CSS3 commands to work. The good news is we don't have to do that anymore. Okay, but I want you guys to be aware of this because chances are you are going to see some code with those commands in it. And that's why they're there. It was for them to work. So a lot of people did not remove the commands because in addition to having the prefixes in front of the commands, they had the regular command without the prefix. So they were covered for any browser and they were also covered for the future. So they didn't have to go back in and change anything. So rounding corners, I know that we've talked about this before, how to do the rounded corners. And you can selectively round. Okay, and the way that that works, if you just say border radius and give a value, it's going to do all the corners. If you want to selectively round, like this one, it starts in the upper left and it goes clockwise. So I didn't round this, so that would have a value of 0 pixels. I did round this. Okay, so that has a value. I did round this, so that has a value as well, and that would be 0. Okay, you can also key in a whole lot of code and specify which ones, but that is actually not how I do it because that is just way too much typing. So how I would do it, yes, they got the border radius. All right. So how I would probably do it is like this. So if I want the top rounded, something like that. So then it would be 25, 25, 0, and 0. Okay, and see how those squared off? So for all of our commands, like for the padding, for the margins, it always kind of goes like a clock. Okay, so this is kind of starting with a box, so you start in the upper left corner. Okay, for a lot of the commands, it goes like a clock and it starts in the upper middle. And then you go to the right, to the bottom, and to the left. Backgrounds, we have been applying backgrounds all along. What we haven't talked about is the fact that you can layer backgrounds. So this is the way you would do that. Now, how would that work? You would have to have some transparency on those backgrounds. So you'd have to go into either Photoshop or LunaPic, add transparency in order to do the layering, but it is available. This is actually a really nice feature. It's new. You can specify the size of the background without editing. Okay, so it's just background size. You give it a width and a height. Now, you do want to be a little careful because you do not want it to look like a funhouse picture. Okay, so just kind of be aware of that. Funhouse images do not look really good in professional web pages. Um, so here's another one, background origin. Lets you specify where the background image is positioned relative to the border. Okay, so these are just little ways to tweak the background. As far as color goes, we've looked at hex, we've looked at color names, we've looked at RGB. There's a couple additional variations. We've got RGBA, which is alpha. So you can actually use alpha to make it more transparent. For those of you that are familiar with hue, saturation, and lightness, that is another way of specifying color. And then here is hue, saturation, and lightness with alpha. You can also do gradients. So we have linear or radial gradients in CSS3. And you can kind of play around with them here. And I've got several examples that you can look at. And you can even do a radial gradient or a repeating gradient. So there's all sorts of cool stuff you can do. We have looked at shadow already. And there is another feature called text overflow. And so here is an example of how that looks. So if I point, you can see everything, which is kind of cool. There's a word wrap feature. There's a word break feature. So you can basically just kind of walk through this and learn all of the new features in CSS3. For those of you that are familiar with Photoshop filters, we have filtering effects. And so these images have not been edited. This is the original, and this is what it looks like with those filters applied. Okay, I did not go into LunaPick and change that. And then I created this just for you guys. So if you want to play with this and, see what it looks like by dragging these, and it kind of only does one at a time. So, but at least you can kind of get an idea of what these filters do to your pictures. Okay. I thought this would be the easiest way for you guys to see, figure out which ones you like. Oh, and down here, it's telling you which ones it's applied. So you can actually see what it was set to or what the slider is setting it to. 2D transformations. Basically, you can move things around. So you can take anything on your screen. You can rotate it, you can scale it, you can make it bigger or smaller. You can skew it, which usually means the bottom stays in place and the top moves to the right or left. You can apply multiple transformations. And again, I thought if I give you a little interactive thing, it helps you understand this better. So this is transform origin, where I'm moving or changing the origin of the box. So if I change the origin of the box, then it affects how it moves. So this is, again, different ways to do 2D transformations. So this is a rotated box. This is translate, where we've repositioned it by specifying a new X and Y. This is a skewed box. And I did include links to interactive sites so you guys can go out and play with this. And 3D transformations, the difference between the 2D and the 3D is the 3D has a Z scale or a Z axis, and that is for depth. So that is the difference. So you're going to have scale, you're going to have translate, but instead of just an X and a Y, you also have a Z. So it's kind of like the same commands with that extra Z access there. So a transition property basically is what you're changing and how many seconds you want the change to occur. Okay, so if I was going to adjust the width when I hover over something, is that going to happen right away, or is it going to happen over time? So this is how you would set that up. So I want a rotation when I hover, and then I want that to take place in 2 seconds. So we can take a look at that. So that's when I'm hovering. So now it's done. Took 2 seconds. And then when you move your mouse off, it goes back to what it was before. This one is a width setting. So again, it's on the hover. So if I hover, the width changes. Okay, so the width was initially 100. When I hover it, it's going to go up to 300, and it does that over a 2-second period. So basically, when you're setting this up on a hover like we did, you've got your initial state. In this case, it's in a div tag. And then we're going to transition it. And then you tell it what you're changing and how many seconds you want the change to occur. Okay, and then you have your trigger. So the trigger here for the change is the hover. You can see I'm changing the width and the height, and I'm also changing the transformation because I'm rotating. So basically, whatever is in front of the colon is what you put up here. So width, height, and transform are the 3 things that I'm changing when I hover. It's in front of the colon, and I'm telling it how many seconds. And then there's all sorts of fancy things you can do. You can delay it. There's timing properties. If any of you have ever done animation, you're probably familiar with ease in and ease out. And so if you're not familiar with those things, you can play with them over in W3 Schools. But basically, ease in, the animation starts slow and then it speeds up. Ease out is the opposite. It starts fast and it ends slow. So all sorts of things you guys can test out. I've got interactive examples you can look at. Animations, we have a keyframes property. So if you've ever done animating, you probably have seen keyframes. And if you haven't, with keyframes, at least in HTML, CSS world, you can do a from and a to, or you can use percentages. And so you guys are going to get a chance to practice this because I'm going to have you create a bouncing ball. So you're going to be seeing how this works. But basically, the keyframes are indicating at these different percentages what you want to happen. Okay, so the keyframes are saying what, and then you have to actually have the animation connected to an element. So this is the animation, but unless you connect it to an element, nothing happens. So you have to connect it to an element, and this is the name of the animation. So you have at keyframes followed by a name, and then this is the number of seconds. Okay, and there's fancy stuff you can do, like you can have it delay, you can have the animation delay, you can have it run 3 times or 4 times. You can change the number of times that it runs. You can also use ease in, ease out. So ease in again, starts slow, ends fast. Ease out, it goes fast at the beginning, but it ends slow. Okay, so lots of different variations to animation, but when you're just starting, I think just kind of getting the basics down is important. And then if you like it and you want to go further, that's when you start learning all of the additional things that you can do. Now, in addition to all the animation, you can actually control some of your user interface in CSS3. There is something called box sizing that you can use. There's a resize feature, and there is outlining. Outlining is actually something that I like to use. It does not come into play as far as the width of the elements. You know how the margin and the padding and the content are all added for width? Outline gives you a nice border and it does not impact the width. And basically, you set up the command the same way that you set up a border. It's just you say outline offset instead of border. And resize is kind of nice. You guys will get the opportunity to practice this, I believe, in the lab assignment, because you will be creating a resizable box just like this. Okay, so resize, usually I set it up for both so that you can, drag it off to the right and both sides change. And you will have the overflow set to auto, so you get scroll bars if you make it too small. So you are going to get the chance to practice that one. So after working through all of this, you're going to go through the textbook assignment. And the textbook assignment is always more directive, but you will get the opportunity to learn quite a few of the CSS3 commands. So there are some files that I am giving you, and then there are files that you are going to be copying from previous weeks, so you can animate those. And so for this one, you're going to add some web fonts. You're going to get the opportunity to work with gradients, and you're going to learn how to do tooltips. So watch the video because it's going to walk you through how to do all of this. Then you are going to take that same page. It's a famous quote page, and you're going to add some animation to it. Now, I did give you a PDF here that you can look at to make sure that you have all of the code correct. Okay, so this is all of the code for that particular file. You're going to create a 3D cube. For some reason, people have a hard time with this. I would probably just go directly to this PDF and print it off to make sure that you are entering things correctly. Because usually if it doesn't look right, it is because of a typo. This is exactly how it should look. Then you're going to create a ball that bounces up and down. So as you can see, most of it's done with CSS, hardly any HTML in this one. Then you are going to take your song snippet file from a couple weeks ago, and you are going to do some animating in that. Okay, so that's what you're going to turn in for your textbook assignment. And then you're going to have the lab assignment. So for the lab assignment, you are going to take your Flexbox model page that you developed in your lesson 6 lab assignment, and you're going to animate the boxes. So this little video kind of shows you how to apply animation to that. And then you are also going to be animating your form. So you're going to take your form from lesson 8 and you're going to animate that. And this video shows you how to do that. Then, if you prefer to read through written directions, you can look at the directions for each one of those. Okay, so there's the form here that you can see live and the flex box. But this is basically what your boxes are going to do. And for the form, there's some animation that happens right away. Okay, so that's pretty much what you're doing on the form and your Flexbox. And again, there's video that shows you how to do that. And I've got written instructions. And then you are going to basically download Resizable Boxes. This is kind of reusing a graphic that you should already have. And you are going to modify the code so that we can resize the boxes that are on the page. That's why it's called Resizable Boxes. Then finally, you're going to add some animation to your assignment page, and you can add an animation keyframe or transition effect to your assignment page. You can do whatever you want, okay? But you have to have some kind of animation on that page. Then you're going to update with links, and you will be done. If you run into trouble, if you've applied some animation and it doesn't work, transfer to the web, send me a link, and I can help you. Have fun with this. This is kind of a fun week. All of this animation and CSS3 is pretty awesome. So I think you guys are really going to like it. Again, let me know if you have questions and have a great week.